And welcome everybody into the Mind Sculptors gameplay series. We've got quite the matchup for you today. Got some great people guest starring on this episode. But first, I am your host, Callahan, and joining me in the booth again this week is Reed, otherwise known as Sick Robot from the Into the North podcast. Reed, how's it going today?
Yeah, it's going pretty well. Thanks for asking.
Good.
Man,
yeah.
I'm so excited to see Rebell try to just bust through Morgan and Pongo playing their own pet decks.
Yeah, this is kind of a wild game because Pongo basically represents two of the decks at the table. So just great way to go into that. So today we've got two people doing some guest appearances on the episode today. We've got Rebel Sun, who is part of the Ramp Gang, very big, awesome, fun YouTube creator. She's awesome. Famously, the Sisay Weatherlight Captain Stan. One of the best CEDH videos of all time, I believe, is when Opposition Agent came out and she made her reaction video.
I would have to agree with that sentiment.
I laughed very hard. But also joining us this week is Twitch streamer Emmaskyeward. She plays a lot of arena, specifically standard and draft formats online a lot. So you can catch her on Twitch. But she's going to be piloting Pongo's Najeela list. It is literally the same list, and I believe there is only a 2-card difference, and it's a Hollowed Fountain instead of a Tundra, and I want to say a Temple Garden instead of a
Savannah.
Yeah, something like that. It's a breeding pool instead of a tropical island, I believe. It's like 2 cards off, so it's effectively the same deck. But we also have Pongo playing his the pet deck that you mentioned is Keenan Bonder Prodigy. This was something in our tier list video he was hyping up quite a bit. And Spleenface is going to be on his Chulane Teller of Tales list. So, starting off with Rebel here on this Sisay Elk list, what is this deck trying to do exactly for us, Sick?
It's a bit different from what you would typically see going on in most CDH decks, considering that it is playing a partner, which is, oh my god, not something that is super common or common at all, because partners sort of got nerfed, if you hadn't noticed.
Yes.
Because partners without having to pay 3 to put them into your hand are nuts.
Correct.
So, it is playing the good old Sisay Weatherlight Captain and Gigantha the Wellspring combination. Pretty hilarious, considering that Sisay has an activated ability for Wooburg, and Gigantha has an activated ability that adds Wooburg, so, there's a bit of obvious synergy there. Basically, the entire list is based around activating Sisay with Gigantha, getting Derevi untaps Gigantha to make more mana, and just going nuts from there in a lot of different ways. Typically, you end the chain by getting the Najeela, and now you have a Wooburg tap to add mana that can activate the Najeela, as well as the Derevi already out, so you're just sort of good to go on the Najeela front there. But there's also just some other weird stuff that this list can get into.
Yes, this is a very interesting one. It's a bit different from I've been playing Sisay for a while as well, and my list is much more of a mid-range consult deck. So it's kind of interesting to see where her list went, and it's pretty awesome. I'm very in awe of how good it is every time I've seen it go. Also at the table, going third, is, like we said, Spleenface. He's going to be playing Chulane Teller of Tales. And so tell us a little bit about this list.
So this Holland list is one that I've actually played against a lot, if that wasn't obvious. Me and Morgan tend to play in a lot of the same IRL places and tend to just naturally play a lot online. Basically, Holland, if you are not familiar, does a very typical Bant thing of drawing cards when you cast creatures, which, just broken in general, but it also puts lands into play when you cast a creature spell, so you can sort of profit mana in some ways, which sort of leads into what its combos are, which is typically putting a Shrieking Drake on the stack and then getting it back to your hand and then putting it on the stack again and doing that a bunch of times until you win the game. Aside from that, I mean, it's also got some other stuff going on. You can do some Mirror Entity Yisan stuff, as always, just classic Bant combos. Also of note, it's pretty much the only CDH deck that can play Alurin, which is definitely a thing, considering that people have been trying to play that card for literal years and haven't really been successful.
I feel like every time a new set comes out in the Najeela Discord, the Alurin page, people will pop in there and be like, this is the new card that breaks Alurin, it makes it good. And it never works.
Well, it never works for Najeela, but it certainly worked when Holland was printed.
Yeah. It's a very interesting list, and I'm very excited to see how it does here at this table. Up next, second in the turn order, is Emmaskyeward. She's going to be playing Pongo's Najeela list. And this is, we have seen Najeela 3 weeks in a row now. But this time, we're seeing it just a little bit differently. This is just straight up Najeela tempo. Nothing weird, no Final Fortunes, nothing of that sort. So for the uninitiated, Sick, what is Najeela tempo doing that's different from what they might have seen in the last 2 weeks?
So, you know how in the past 2 weeks you might have seen some spicy stuff potentially out of Najeela, I mean, I'm not saying Underworld Breach is spicy, but it's not
right.
It's not exactly what you would think of when you think of Najeela in one card, one cons, right? Basically what this list is doing is not playing any of that spice and just playing good cards. Yeah, I mean, it's basically a list that has a bunch of one card win cons and it's chock full of interaction. That's basically the best way that you can describe this. You have Derevi, you got Nature's Will, sometimes Jura's Repository, not so much anymore. A bunch of ways to find those, a consult backup win con because consult layers nicely, and then just interaction out the wazoo.
Yeah, I have had to play against this specific list a lot because our friend Phoenix really likes to play Najeela. So there was a period of time in our local league where I had to play against Najeela about 4 or 5 weeks in a row, and it was not fun. But speaking of Pongo, going first in the turn order is Pongo on his certainly his biggest pet deck, Keenan Ponder Prodigy. And so tell us a little bit about what this deck is trying to do.
So Keenan Ponder Prodigy is basically just a commander that makes a lot of mana. And by a lot of mana, I mean a lot of mana.
Yes.
Tacking on one to every dork, rock, and whatever else you might want to tap for mana at any point in time is pretty nuts. As well as having a colored mana outlet for infinite mana makes it fairly powerful, I would say, in some form or another. It's also it's really good at just rolling the dice, not particularly in this list. I believe the only bomb that we're going to be seeing out of this is Consecrated Sphinx, which, I mean, definitely is a bomb, but it's not really the density that you would think about having in, say, like a Kinnan roll the dice list. This Kinnan list is really just more about looking for infinite mana combos and just trying to get there off of stuff like, I believe, well, we don't have the power artifact here, but we have stuff like Isochron Scepter, obviously. We have Basalt Monolith, which goes one card infinite with Kinnan, and then you just need to turn that into colored mana to win the game. Yeah, just, I mean, pretty easy to stuff to find in blue-green. And then it's also, I mean, we sort of have to mention this because it's the name of the deck. It's also playing Mirage Mirror because Mirage Mirror is actually fairly interesting in the list. You can turn it into a copy of a Basalt Monolith, make infinite untaps with it, and then turn it into a land to turn that into colorless mana, or colored mana rather, which is pretty interesting. It's also very accessible. It's an artifact. Not bad.
That is very interesting.
Yes.
That is not a line I would have thought of, but that's that's a cool way of doing that. Well, I'm interested to see how these go. That was our deck list overview. That was brought to you by Moxfield. And here we go as we go into the starting hands for our 4 players here. We're going to start off here with Rebell. Rebell kept a 4 cards. So she had to mulligan pretty aggressively, it appears. Her 4 cards for her opening hand were Wheel of Misfortune, Windswept Teeth, Jeweled Lotus, and Grim Monolith. So, sick. With her going last in the turn order, how does this really make you feel about where she's at right now?
I mean, going to 4, never great. That being said, for a 4-card hand, this one is sort of nuts. You have your turn 1 Sisay with the Jeweled Lotus, which is just insane. If you had another land drop, you can play out that Grim Monolith and then get onto the Wheel of Misfortune afterward. If you hit like any fast mana, you potentially have a turn 1 Wheel of Misfortune, which is nuts. I mean, it's sort of got the stuff that you need. It doesn't have any interaction, which is potentially fairly painful. But I mean, going last, you generally don't want to be holding up interaction anyway. So this is pretty much about as much as you can ask for in a 4-card hand, aside from immediate fast mana turn 1 wheel.
Right. Up next is Spleen. He's going 3rd in the turn order. He kept a 6-card hand. His 6 was Prismatic Vista, an Island, Carpet of Flowers, Priest of Titania, Flusterstorm, and Swords to Plowshares. So what are your thoughts on those 6 cards?
I'm not super happy. I understand why he didn't go down to 5 here, but this hand represents its interaction and a lot of mana, so you can pretty consistently count on getting your Holland down early enough. But this is really going to be reliant on hitting creatures to cycle through with Holland or hitting tutors, because there's not much gas going on here on its own, and Holland doesn't really dig you out of a card advantage hole on its own without creatures in hand to feed into him.
Interesting. Up next, going 2nd in the turn order, Emmaskyeward on Najeela. She kept 7. Her 7 was Jeweled Lotus, Wooded Foothills, Swan Song, Exotic Orchard, Pyroblast, Ella Damri's Call, and Savannah. So that's quite the opening 7 out of Najeela, isn't it?
I mean, just you only had to say Jeweled Lotus. I'm gonna be honest here. The entire rest of the hand is unnecessary. Jeweled Lotus is pretty much just the optimal start for any Najeela deck. I mean, the Eldamri's Call is icing on top because you can just immediately go for Derevi and try to get there on turn 3. But yeah, that's looking rough for everybody else at the table, especially going 2nd.
Yeah, absolutely. Going first, however, is Pongo. He kept 6 cards in his opening hand. His 6 was Windswept Teeth, Mox Diamond, Misty Rainforest, Shared Sunrise, Worldly Tutor, and Prismatic Vista. So, how does that hand look to you?
Looks pretty good, honestly. The Mox Diamond is going to be pulling a lot of the weight of getting Kinnan off the ground once he's on the board to generate some extra mana. But with the 2 tutors and Worldly Tutor and Shared Summons, it's looking fairly consistent here. The Worldly Tutor can definitely go for a Dork if need be, potentially a Bloom Tender, something to that effect, or even something like a Trophy Mage or a Spellseeker to get access to your combo pieces better, or potentially just even more mana. And the Shared Summon is definitely something that is nice to have as a game ender. Just fire it off, tutor up 2 of your big pieces, like, say, a Phantasmal Image and a Trophy Mage or something to that effect, and just sort of get there. I mean, I'd be happy to have this as a 6 card for Kinnan.
Awesome. Well, those are our opening hands. We're going to take a quick timeout, and we'll be right back with you. And welcome everybody back to the Mind Sculptors gameplay series. I'm Callahan. This is Sick joining me again. And we just got done with our opening hands. And so it looks like everybody is getting ready to go into the game. And so let's go ahead and jump right into it. Looks like they are getting started here. So Pongo has the opening here.
So we're going to be looking here for the turn 1 Kinnan, potentially. I don't think it's worth firing off the Worldly Tutor turn 1.
Okay.
That being said, Pongo has been known to sandbag Kinnan a bit, just to make sure that it stays safe, but I can't imagine that's correct on turn 1.
Well, he plays the Misty Rainforest, Mox Diamond, pitches the Windswept Teeth to the Mox Diamond, and he is fetching up a tropical island. Looks like turn 1 Keenan.
Yeah.
So it could possibly be, and I'm curious what your thoughts are here. Is it a, just because of the table he's at, he might feel a little safer putting Keenan onto the board early?
Yeah, I mean, it's also being first player in seat 1, it's a lot safer because people don't have like a turn 2 to try to find an answer or something, or like turn 2 is when Gilded Drakes start coming down, so you're basically guaranteeing yourself a turn here, say, from Gilded Drakes by being first in line.
That makes sense. Emma drops the Jeweled Lotus and goes ahead and fetches for a volcanic island here. And it looks like she's going to crack that Jeweled Lotus and play that Najeela.
Looks like it.
Spoiler alert. We all could have called that, right?
Yeah.
So, fetching for the volcanic island here, what is she trying to represent with the volcanic island?
I think she's just trying to represent interaction here. I'm not a huge fan of fetching one-off. It makes sense if she's a bit newer to the format. Just get it out of the way immediately. But I would have liked to have seen her hold the fetch at least, because it's unlikely that we're going to see an opposition agent here out of Rebel, considering it is turn 1 and she went to 4 cards. I feel like you're pretty safe to just hold on to that fetch and fetch optimally for what you actually need at the time.
Right. Spleen goes ahead, gets a Prismatic Vista, fetches up a forest, and fires off a Carpet of Flowers.
Yeah.
And right now that's only going to be making 1, but presumably that might be making more here pretty soon.
Yeah, I would imagine, considering we have a Kinnan deck at the table, that this is going to become very large very quickly. Large and in charge, as Spleen might say.
He moves on to his second main phase. One thing I think is interesting here, and you brought up the opposition agent. Oh, get a Swords on the Najeela from Spleenface here.
This makes a lot of sense. It's just, this is definitely rough for Morgan. You obviously sort of want to put it out there. Yeah.
Yep, Swansong on the Swords, which makes total sense.
It's sort of rough to be Spleen here, just because, like, you're really split on, you don't want to, like, burn the swords too early, but the more turns that Najeela gets, like, it just gets exponentially worse to leave her on board. So you sort of have to go for the removal here. But the issue is also, like, it's an early Kinnan and an early Najeela. Like, your swords is being stretched super thin, and, like, the other one's just sort of going to spiral out of control very quickly. So this is, like, necessary, but it feels really bad, and it feels even worse that it's getting countered, because now you just have 2 ridiculous threats on turn 1. that aren't being dealt with.
Well, he does get the consolation prize of a bird.
Certainly does.
So he has a body. Rebel plays Windswept Teeth, drops her Lotus down, and presumably Sisay is coming in. There she is.
Looks like it. I think we're just in the world of whoever draws the Jeweled Lotus in their 3 CMC commander deck just sort of wins the game now, right? And
it looks like Rebel top decked in LED.
What a draw. That might be really nice with the Wheel of Misfortune. If she can somehow get up to 3 mana to cast it, just, crack it in response and be able to do stuff after it.
Right. Well, she passes the turn after that, hands it back off to Pongo. And one of the things I was going to say this here a moment ago for Rebel that is kind of an advantage for her is really the only player she has to worry about have an opposition agent potentially is Emma at the table. Mm-hmm.
Which is, that's certainly the downfall of this list, is that you're basically required to search your library to win the game.
Right.
Oh, so here's a Springleaf Drum. This is going to spiral into a lot of mana very quickly. He's already at 5 on turn 2. Which is...
Keenan is very dumb.
Yeah, this is enough for casting that Shared Summons at instant speed, which is pretty ridiculous. We also might see some mana held up for interaction and potentially Whirly Tutor, but remember that Shared Summons is also an instant, so this could get very oppressive.
Well, he passes the turn, he leaves up that Prismatic Vista. Emma plays the Savannah for turn, and... I would assume we're going to see Najeela swing somewhere.
Yeah, looks like it.
If you are sitting here, which way would you swing Najeela?
I'd probably put this toward Rebel, honestly. She really can't afford to lose the Sisay, and there's no chance in hell that she ever blocks. Gideon is a bit less annoying to block with and recast, just because the recast is only 4 mana, and refunds so much of it anyway, because he had so much mana on the rest of your permanents.
Right.
And I think Sisay, especially along with being in black, has all that stuff going with it.
Right.
You can just afford to swing past the Sisay, because the Sisay really can't do much here.
Well, it looks like Emma did pass the turn, elected not to swing, and pass the turn over to Spleenface, who plays an island as land for turn. And it looks like he's still only getting one off of the Carpet of Flowers, and he makes a green off of that, casts a Priest of Titania. That seems to be his turn there, and that's a pretty sad Priest of Titania right now.
Yeah, it certainly is. Kidden isn't one to not have dorks in play, but it's also not necessary a lot of the time with the amount of fast mana and artifact mana in the deck as well, so... Not unexpected, but it's definitely sad to see everybody with fast mana starts rather than dork starts, which all these decks could have had. Except for, I guess, Sisay. Well.
Well, Rebel did get another land, cracked both of the fetches, and so she is double fetching right here. So what do you think she's probably getting off of this? I would assume something with some red mana.
Yeah, you definitely want some amount of red mana here just for the Wheel of Misfortune. I'm not sure how much you want. Potentially only the one red source. This might be going for... Yeah, I was about to say that. And then potentially a Trop, or you might not want overlapping, so... Bayou, potentially?
That might make sense. You kind of don't want to feed into the carpet for sure, yeah, I would assume.
The issue is, Trop is obviously a very good land in pretty much any deck that can play it, but you really don't want to feed this carpet any more than you need to. That being said, it could be worth it just because if you know that Pongo is going to be feeding it, then you could do that.
That is true. Savannah seems to be, or is that Scrubland?
I can never tell.
I think that's Savannah.
It's a Scrubland, I think it's a Scrubland. Anyway, we're seeing the Grim Monolith here. This is setting up for Wheel of Misfortune next turn. Potentially also going for Gigantha. You can go for the Crack LED, discard your hand, get Gigantha into your hand, and then cast it through the Grim Monolith. I'm not sure how happy I am about, going, like, tapping out all of my mana just to try to go for it, though.
Makes sense. Worldly Tutor at end of Rebel's turn from Pongo. Spleen is currently trying to decide if he wants to do anything about that. What do you think Pongo would be trying to get off of this Keenan?
Honestly, I'm not totally sure. I don't think you're trying to get a copy effect here. I think it's potentially just going for a Trophy Mage. Trophy Mage would let you go to get a Basalt Monolith. Try to make infinite mana. If you get to making infinite mana, then Shared Summons gets you there. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure. I mean, Pongo knows the inner workings of the stack far better than I do, and there might be other lines that he's yelling at me through his screen right now for.
He gets a forest off of this Prismatic Vista, is very actively not feeding the carpet.
Which is good. He definitely has the other sources available to be able to not feed the carpet. All right.
And he is paying for the Flusterstorm, so he's going to go ahead and get his shuffle, or get his tutor, I should say. Rebel's just kind of explaining how her deck works to Emma, because it is certainly a deck that is a little unintuitive for somebody who's not familiar with it.
Definitely.
It's specifically, I had to look it over a couple times and realize I was like, oh, so you go Derevi, Semet into Narset, and then that's kind of how you do it. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, this is
Pongo is
going to get very rough for Emma. Going into the later turns, especially once people start getting better blockers into play, because I think she really needed to swing that turn to start amassing warriors. And I think that's just sort of us seeing her not swing is really just an indicator of inexperience with the format, not necessarily any level of skill or anything, just not being necessarily super familiar with the deck that she's playing, and is what sort of the win conditions are there with needing to get up to a critical mass of warriors as soon as possible. And also the dynamics of thinking about if people actually can afford to block you in Agila, even if they have the ability to, right? Which isn't necessarily a super intuitive thing to pick up on the first thing, is that if you're coming from other formats, it's very reasonable to look at somebody else's board and be like, oh, they can block my obvious win con with the creatures that they have on board. I guess I can't afford to swing into them. When in a 4-player format, it's a lot more likely that they're not just going to basically take the hit and then only put both of you two down a rung and leave the other players basically unharmed.
Right.
It's sort of an interesting dynamic that isn't necessarily very apparent to people that tend to play 1v1 formats primarily.
The one question I do have is, because if she swings, she makes one warrior, and that would swing at Rebel, I would assume, because it gets blocked either other way. So I don't know that she's necessarily amassing warriors, is she?
Potentially not, but I mean, you still want to get the swings in, and then you can potentially attempt to politic somebody into not blocking, or you can make the attempt. But I think it's pretty much always correct to just swing the Nagila there.
Interesting. Well, it does look like Pongo tutored up a good old-fashioned Thrasios. Which
Thrasios.
You love to see it. It will always be strange to me. Anytime I see Thrasios in the 99, it just feels wrong.
I mean, that being
so he draws
said,
that for turn.
It's certainly a powerful card in this list with the just pure raw amount of mana that you're making. It's very nice to have the mana dump readily available, and it's also having it in play makes it a lot easier to win the game, because now just finding a Basalt Monolith will get you there, and you don't need to convert that mana.
Ancient Tomb for land after casting the Thrasios. And he passes the turn after that over to Emma. Emma draws for turn, and be interesting to see kind of where she gets here. Arid Mesa for land for turn. And she goes ahead and cracks it. Interested to see what she gets here. It sounds like she's going after a bayou. Oh, excuse me, scrubland.
Okay. I'm not super happy about the scrubland fetch here. I think like it makes your mana pretty awkward for anything that you might want to do. But it does give her the Eldomri's Call mana, which is going to be required for getting the Derevi into play.
So she is going to attack, and she is doing that attack at Rebel this turn.
Yep. This is what I would have liked to have seen last turn, definitely. But getting on the train, I mean, even one turn late, it's better to recognize the mistake and commit to, like, recovering and doing the same thing rather than just trying to justify not doing it and then never doing it, right?
Well, she did get the attack through, and let's see kind of how this happens.
So I think, I believe
and
Rebel
she
blocked,
passes her turn.
Rebel blocked the warrior. Emma's, this is sort of the issue that I had with prefetching the Volcanic Island as well, because it's, if she had gotten, say, a breeding pool instead of the Volcanic Island there, then she would have been able to cast the Eldomri's Call turn 2 and then potentially drop a Derevi this turn. You wouldn't have had the warriors, obviously, but like it was an option rather than prefetching the Volcanic Island here and then being stuck without being able to cast the Eldomri's Call for anything until this turn. So now you're just sort of a turn behind on that.
All right.
Morgan.
Spleen is tapping the saddest Priest of Titania of all time.
Ooh.
Recruiter of the Guard.
That's certainly
that's
a draw.
Spicy.
So when I was talking about this hand being reliant on draws, that was definitely one of the top 3 draws that I was talking about there. So
what does this go get for you?
So potentially, I would say this is probably getting a Shrieking Drake. That being said, there's a large toolbox of utility creatures that are available to this deck. You get value just generally off of casting creatures in the first place for like free, just having your commander out. So you get to play like a very large breadth of toolboxy creature cards. So this could be going for any number of things, but I mean, I would expect the Shrieking Drake. It is sort of like the most direct line toward the win here.
Makes sense. Ooh, Collector.
Right.
Oof.
So this makes sense. Shuts down Pongo, shuts down Rebel if she doesn't go for it this turn. That being said, I mean, if Morgan has the land drop, this could also just be brutal. But he doesn't.
He had to pass the turn.
So Rebel's sort of, I think, locked into just going for it exactly this turn. Because obviously the oof's coming down next turn. You can't really afford to not go for it.
Right. Soul Ring from Rebel.
That's pretty good.
Uses the two colorless in the red, and I'm the Wheel of Misfortune.
Yep, here we go. And
holding priority to crack the LED.
Yeah. So the nice thing about holding priority and cracking the LED here for specifically this list is that even if you don't manage to find anything to cast off of the mana that you that you pumped into the LED, you can still use that to put Sisay into your, or Jegantha rather, into your hand. So you're pretty much, there's a 0% chance of you like wasting this mana off cracking the LED. Whereas in other decks, you might be weighing your choices of like, okay, I can crack the LED here, but I have to choose some color of mana, and there's a very real chance that I don't draw any like real cards of that color of mana, so like it might just go to waste, and it might have been better to just hold the LED, but that's pretty much never going to happen in this deck.
So I believe what they are going to be doing is DMing their picks here to well, myself. I was the judge on this game.
An impartial third party.
So I was certainly an impartial third party. Well, and when we went and did this, it was very awkward because this is one of my issues with this card.
Yeah.
Is I feel like this is an incredibly difficult card to resolve. Period. End of story. all the time that is not in a like purely digital MTGO format.
Yeah.
That is kind of, I think I said this in our set review, where I wish this was a silver bordered card, because as a judge, this card like presents a lot of issues.
Yeah, just logistical issues, right? It's just very annoying. I mean, so even like on webcam, you can potentially do the thing where like you write a number down on a slip of paper, everybody covers it with their hand, and then like once it's in play, they can just all lift up their hands and then do the thing that way. But actually, the other day, I had to resolve this card on Cockatrice, and that is not possible in Cockatrice. So you actually are basically required to go get a fifth person to mediate the resolution of this card, because like you just there's no like real way to do this aside from making like 20 tokens, one for each possible number that you could choose, putting them into your sideboard, and then dragging them all out at once.
Thanks, Wizards.
Much appreciated.
So the payment went, Pongo paid 2, Emma paid 5, Rebell paid 5, and Spleenface, he played 3. So Emma, I think, accidentally wheeled her hand away.
Nice. Beautiful. Yeah, I think... So Pongo chose 2 there, which indicates to me that he actually wanted to wheel this hand. Or he was next leveling and was trying to screw over somebody who wanted to wheel but didn't want to choose 3, and they wanted to go like the minimum requirement, which was 2. and he didn't want to wheel, but he thought that somebody would choose 2, so he chose 2 in order to screw both of them out of a wheel.
Very interesting.
Incredibly interesting dynamics here.
This is kind of goes back to the issue I have here. She did discard the Mox Diamond, the Pyroblast, Exotic Orchard, Ella Damry's Call, and the what's the
Fire
other
Covenant.
one called there? Fire Covenant. It's trying to determine what some of these cards are on webcam can be incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I definitely think that you can't really choose 5 there if you don't want to wheel. I mean, like if you don't want to wheel, you're pretty much always choosing 1, right? So I think that was definitely...
I believe there was some like board dynamic issues where the discussion kind of swayed her into that a little bit, was my impression.
Yeah, the issue here, though, is that like if you're going to commit to that, I think you always have to respond with a Fire Covenant here, because there's just too much value on the board, and you just sort of need to get rid of all of it, right? Like
Fire Covenant there certainly would have been very, very good.
You definitely don't want that Thrasios in play like ever. You want the Sisay gone, and the getting rid of the Priest of Titania definitely stops the Hullen from coming down in a reasonable period of time. So like I think there's just like enough here that you pretty much always fire the Fire Covenant off, in my opinion.
I think that's entirely fair. We see 2 there from Rebell playing Arcane Signet. Playing a tapped Hall of the Bandit Lord. Nothing to see here, folks. Don't worry about this.
That. I've had that experience a lot playing Hermit Druid decks. Just no. I'm playing it because it's my only land. Don't be that worried, okay? I'm not going to do anything with it. I just want to have a land drop.
Birds of Paradise from Rebell after she uses the 3 off of the LED to put Jegantha into her hand. And so it looks like Rebell, barring any sort of interaction, is about a turn away from going off.
Yeah, seems that way to me.
Passes the turn over to Pongo, who activates Thrasios on her end step, reveals a bird of his own. So Pongo is going to be making quite a bit of mana.
Just a small amount. You know, a very reasonable amount of mana.
To be fair, this could be a lot worse if he had dorks.
Oh yeah, I mean there are ways that this could be worse, but I don't think sitting across from him I'd be happy in any way.
That is entirely fair. Birds does come down from Pongo, who did not get to wheel, so I think he only has 1 or 2 cards in hand.
That being said, one of those cards is a shared summons, which is again incredibly good in this deck. Exchanging 5 mana for 2 creatures of your choice is pretty nuts in a lot of cases.
Certainly. End step, Emma is brainstorming on end step.
Okay.
So interesting. Yeah, I mean, this is, kind of some of those things where you're newer to the format. You kind of are feeling out some of those, like the Fire Covenant situation. Yeah. Some of those are not entirely obvious to everybody.
I want to make it clear that I'm not criticizing Emma for her play. I just want to make some light of some situations that may not be particularly obvious to somebody who's not pretty deeply ingrained into CDH, because it's not a particularly easy format to get a handle on, and it does actually require a fair number of hours just to get the general rules of play into your mind, and like how people tend to react to things, and like what the general lines of play around, especially wheels, tend to be pretty interesting to play around. And because a lot of 60 card formats have pretty much banned all relevant wheels, so it's not really typical patterns of play that you see in any other format. So it actually takes a bit of getting used to playing around wheels and like potential people having wheels in hands and such.
It's very interesting dynamic for sure. I know with this, however, I will say this much. If you're being critical of my plays last week and Phoenix's plays last week, I think that's perfectly valid. We both made some questionable decisions.
I appreciate the permission to be critical.
Carpet of Flowers does come down here for Emma.
It's a nice one. I mean, it's not super great now, but we'll see. There's a Soul Ring?
Yep. Soul Ring from her as well. And it's good to see that she also has the correct printing of Soul Ring.
Yes. Completely agree. Emma definitely...
Najeela in a warrior at Rebel.
Taste.
Go ahead, and sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that Emma definitely has correct taste in card arts and such. Especially that playmat. Beautiful playmat, by the way. I don't know if we've commented on that.
Yes, the Sub McKinnon playmat is fantastic. Beautiful.
So Rebel...
That Into the North one, though, it's who cares about that, though, right? Like,
hey, man. we just got our Into the North playmats. It's been 2 years since we started the podcast. So it's actually interesting.
She does
Rebel
pass the turnover.
Yeah, Rebel doesn't block the warrior, which is interesting. That's definitely a foot into the door, right? Definitely start getting there with just one warrior. That's all it takes sometimes.
Najeela is one of those decks that if you let it get any sort of gas, it will just run away with the game very quickly.
Any foothold, and Najeela can actually just start beating people to death with combat damage. Not even infinite combat damage, just combat damage.
And I mean, I think there was a game in this recording session where I think Emma did get in, was just attacking all game, and just everybody died to warriors, and it wasn't even infinite amounts. It was just a lot of warriors. Yeah. Crop rotation here from Spleen, sacrificing the forest.
Almost certainly getting Gaia's Cradle.
That would make sense.
Yeah. So we're probably seeing Hullen here. I can't imagine we don't. Unless we're seeing, dumping a handful of hate bears. In which case, I would give him permission not to cast the Hullen here.
Getting Gaia's Cradle seems very good, considering that his Priest of Titania is putting in no work right now.
You would much rather have the better Priest of Titania in play, which...
And it's very strange, because you would think at this table that Priest of Titania would be doing extraordinarily well.
It just happens that there were 2 people that had dual Lotus hands, and Pongo happens to be playing the one Simic deck that is incredibly heavy on rocks and not particularly on dorks.
And there's Hulain. I don't think he has anything left on this turn. He has 1 blue floating, or he has the 1 blue and the priest. Yeah, it looks like he passes the turn there. So he gets that down just in time for Rebel to attempt to win the game. So we'll see if anybody can interact with her here. So she draws for turn, plays a Bloodstained Mire.
So we
don't
actually know about any interaction in Morgan and Emma's hands, just because they did get wheeled, but we know that Pongo doesn't really have much here, so this could definitely be a real threat, and especially with the silence.
Silence is on the stack. Pongo is gonna activate Thrasios, which seems reasonable.
Seems like a reasonable thing to be doing. Well then.
He's revealing Flusterstorm. That will certainly do that.
That will help. I'm not sure how much it stops this, but it definitely assists in the stopping of this turn. The issue is, even if the silence gets countered, you still need to have an answer to the Gigantha, which is not particularly easy to have, especially if it has haste.
Now, this is very interesting here, because we saw 2 weeks ago a similar situation to this where I cast a silence. Pongo was the first person in the turn order to get really anything to do, and he did force Spleenface to use his Flusterstorm on this. So now he has the Flusterstorm and has the thing ahead of it. So this is a very interesting situation, and is kind of feels a little bit similar to that situation 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. I mean, this is sort of the thing with silence, right? It's like, in the moment, you view silence as like this thing that needs to be countered, and it doesn't need to be countered, but like, even if it gets countered, you still probably have to fight a whole war for the thing that comes after it.
Right. Silence does get Flusterstormed, but Rebel just pays for it, and Emma passes the turn.
That's not good.
I think we're gonna see what Spleen has. Winds of Rebuke on the Sisay.
Yeah.
That might just do it.
Probably does, quite honestly. Oh, and there's no interaction. Oh, no. All right, well.
So that goes back to her hand.
There goes the win attempt.
And everybody's going to put in the top two. It looks like Sneak Attack and Mana Crypt from Rebel. And Command Tower and, is that an Arkham's Astroblade, Grob and a Land from Emma, and Mana Crypt and something else from Spleenface. Couldn't actually see what it was. So some fast mana is getting dumped here, but the silence does resolve.
Yep. So, I mean, Rebel has stuff that she can do here. It's just not a win, unfortunately.
Well, it kind of comes down to what's in her hand. We don't know what is in her hand. So that will be kind of interesting to kind of figure out. We can kind of take a guess, but
so we know that there's
can't know for sure.
And a Gigantha, which is
we know that for sure.
Definitely not a bad start. Just there's not quite enough mana to get going there right now. That being said,
because Gigantha gets you to. So you basically have to tap out for the Gigantha, correct?
Yeah, so you can tap out for the Gigantha here. It has haste. Unfortunately, you can't recast the Sisay with it, because obviously Gigantha can't pay for generic mana costs as part of its restriction. Right. So you can't get the Sisay back into play this turn, but you could get the Sisay back into play next turn and then attempt to win there. But Gigantha would also let you pay for costs for stuff like Dorks, for stuff that doesn't have like additional mana costs, right? So Dorks, stuff like I don't know, Imperial Seal, Top Deck Tutors, stuff of that sort. You definitely cast something like Gamble off of it. Potentially even Derevi if she has it.
Let's see what happens there. Does crack the Bloodstained Mire. What would the fetch target be in your opinion here?
So you definitely want probably some more green mana here, because you're only producing green mana off of your Rock and Dork. Yeah. This was probably going to be either a Trop or a Bayou, and then probably not a Trop because you don't really want to feed the carpet, although I'm not sure how much of an issue that is at this point in time.
Tapping the bird, the signet, and all three of those lands. There comes Jugantha. Yep. That is a hasty elk.
It's a very hasty elk. It's a speedy elk.
It is. The funny thing is when I was originally looking at this list before I really knew what it was doing, and it was called, it was like elk in the name. My initial thought was that Oko was the reason it was named elk. And I was like, what is it doing with Oko that it's like winning so fast? And then I just kept like reading the deck list. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm here now.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because my build that I made of Sasay was a very mid-rangey consultation list that chained things together, and then had like a backup win con of Godo Helm, because you could just tutor it up and it was like a 1-card tutor. So it was very interesting. So this is very much more all-in combo list.
It's much more of like a Sisay list, right? Rather than a 5-color combo soup list.
Right.
It's like pretty much completely dedicated to just like doing Sisay things, which is admirable, I think.
Right.
It's like extracting the most uniqueness and power that you can get out of like that specific commander rather than like whatever 5-color deck you want to throw together.
Right.
So we're seeing... Still thinking on this Jugantha, I think. Or...
There's a lot of math involved with this turn, for sure.
Yeah, so I don't think we're getting there. You would have to have a crypt which she milled over. Okay.
The crypt would have certainly gotten you close. I don't know if it gets you there.
Oh, yeah, I guess you would need... you need some other white mana somehow, potentially. Okay, so we have one of each.
Here we go. Let's see what we can do here. White, blue, green.
She has the Derevi. Oh my god. That's crazy. That's probably like one of the best possible things to have in your hand at this point.
Untaps Soul Ring. The fact that she just has the Derevi is wild.
So crazy. I think the Soul Ring untap's probably loose here. You probably want to untap the Grim Monolith, honestly. Just because it adds more colorless.
That looks like she is. She did change her mind to do that. Okay.
So we have this. This could potentially be like Treasonous Ogre or something. I don't think so. Is this another...
Tuner red for Wheel of Fortune. Well, this is her clearly trying to find something, discarding a Chrome Mox.
Discarding the Sisay is definitely rough here.
Correct. But with the Chrome Mox and Wheel of Fortune, all you have in hand, you can't recast the Sisay anyhow.
No, definitely not. But it makes it a bit harder to get there next turn. Not much, just because you have so much mana anyway, but it's definitely a consideration. Yeah, we're just looking for fast mana and interaction, I think.
It looks like everybody's just got their stuff, but nobody's doing anything because of the silence. But Share Summons is now in the bin, so that changes a lot of stuff for Pongo on his next turn. But one difference is he has 7 cards in hand now. And that's not great for the rest of the table.
Yeah, 7 cards in hand and that much mana is not a winning strategy for the rest of the table in pretty much any deck, let alone Kinnan.
But I think this is the only route that Rebel has a shot.
Oh yeah,
of getting back into
definitely
it.
Just dump your hand and go for the wheel here. Like I don't think that you can try to go for a win without doing this, just because you don't have any protection in the hand that you discarded. It was like only a Chrome Mox in the Sisay, right? So
Correct.
pretty much have to go for the wheel here. It just sucks for the rest of the table. This probably means that Pongo is getting there on his turn, especially with that Fierce Guardian chip being discarded from Morgan. Yeah, not happy to see that go.
Exiling the
oh my god,
Elvish Spirit Guide, Manamorphose.
There's definitely mana being made here.
This is such an interesting deck list. Every time I see her play this, I just want to sleeve it up so badly. It looks so much fun.
It's very unique, right?
It feels like nothing else in CDH, honestly. Yeah. Like, nothing else feels this interesting to me.
All right, so we're going to
So she's got a black that she can only use on a black mana symbol, a red and a blue that she can use on anything. So this is a very weird spot to be in, but she also has a silence on the stack, so that really works in her favor. But not great if she doesn't have anything to do here.
I'd imagine she has at least one more thing to be doing here. I don't think you fire off the Manamorphose pitching an ESG if you don't have something else. I think it's just a matter of like, how much do you have here? I would assume there's only like one, maybe a maximum of 2 more cards that you can cast this turn.
Okay. So looks like she's going to use the blue and the red. It's very silent there in the game space, and Emma is acknowledging this in the gameplay chat. Is she going to use the red and the blue? No, maybe not. This is such a strange situation. I know some of these turns feel like they take so long, but there's a lot of math involved in this.
Yeah. I mean, kind of like having restricted mana also doesn't help the case at all, because you have to really consider what you're using your mana on. So I think we can, at this point, safely deduce that she doesn't have a dockside, because it would have been just absolutely slammed at this point.
Just slammed the dockside,
It's probably something else. We're seeing the generic blue-red being spent for a snap.
Ooh, a snap.
Okay. So just refiltering this. Potentially this is nice just to be able to hold up mana, you know? So that you actually can represent some amount of interaction. I don't think this is particularly...
Snap is getting the Hulane.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely makes sense. It like Najeela can potentially get there this turn, but like there needs to be no blockers, basically. And like it's a bit strapped. Like you'd have to have exactly Derevi in hand already in order to get there. I think this is fairly reasonable, especially with the Guy's Cradle in play. And a full grip. That being said, like it sucks that you have to point the snap at Spleen, because you would really like to point it at Pongo and get rid of like one of his things if you could, but like snapping any of his creatures doesn't really do anything here, unfortunately.
Right. The amount of mana he is producing right now is, I mean, he's getting at least 2, 4. I mean, he has like 6 mana just off of rocks, and which is just obnoxious. So Rebel kind of fizzles there. Has a volcanic island and I think that's a scrub land up. So passing over to Pongo, and
that means no Abrupt Decay or Assassin's Trophy, although it doesn't look like the list is on those anyway, so interesting, but...
Crypt from Pongo, that is insane.
Yeah, you know, casual Black Lotus that's repeatable.
That is absolutely gross.
There's a mana ball.
Oh my gosh. So we can presume the wheel was very good to Pongo.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Oh my goodness. Chromox exiling. That is gross.
I mean, at this point, you just kind of
clench your butt cheeks and hope you don't lose, right? Like,
even if he doesn't have anything immediately available to him, like a tutor or a line to the win, you can just dump all of this mana into Thrasios and probably get some amount of things going.
yeah, I mean, he has 2 floating, so that means he has 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 just off of artifacts. That is at least 2 Thrasios activations.
It's definitely a true statement that it's at least 2. Now, what I really want to see here is him not go for a win, but instead find a dramatic reversal somehow and cast a dramatic reversal, and then tap even more mana and just activate Thrasios even more.
Is that the big baller move?
I mean, like, it's just, you want to waste as much of the table's time as possible by making mana and dumping it into Thrasios and then repeating that process without going infinite so that they can't concede to get out of it. You want to keep your opponents locked in this game for as long as possible. Oh, no. So, see, this is...
Stroke for 8.
This is how you ruin that game, because now you're basically just going to win the game and you don't get to waste the table's time as much. This is basically guaranteed to get there. What you really want to do is you want to make it look and seem like you have a fail chance here. And just string the rest of the table along. This is basically just throwing that out the window and saying, yeah, I'm winning.
I don't think he was expecting that to resolve, in all fairness.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
8 cards. That is absolutely insane that he got Mana Vault, Chromox,
and Mana Crypt?
Mana Crypt, and clearly a Stroke. I mean, that is absolutely absurd.
It's basically best case scenario. It's just what you want to see. Honestly, I think I might have wanted to have seen him also dump an Ancient Tomb into this. But
yeah, to go up to what, 10? Yeah. All right, so he is going to get probe Emma. So everybody's looking away, so we'll see what Emma has here in a moment.
It's a 50-50 between Rebel and Emma. You've Young Get Probe here, Mystical Tutor, but you can't get into it. So it's...
Nature's Will was in there. Arbor Elf.
So you're safe from Emma now. You basically just have to worry about Rebel, and Rebel didn't counter the pull or the stroke.
So of genius.
You're basically looking at potential removal, and that's about it here. You're only really worried about, I think, swords, and even then, at this point, once the stroke is resolved, I'm assuming he has something for like a single interactive piece.
Let's see. Oh,
yeah,
Basalt Monolith, and that's the game, right?
Should be.
Well, nobody has any answers for it.
Yeah. And
that is a gross combo.
It's done. I mean, this activation means
and we're
over just because he has enough to reactivate the untap like 3 times or something. Just, yeah.
That is so disgusting.
You would need like 4 Nature's Claims here just to stop this from happening.
Good grief.
So deck in hand.
So he's presenting the win. Yep. Well, not all. He doesn't have his deck in hand. He would have every land in play. Sorry. Come on, Sick. You got to have it correct.
So we're probably going to see, deck in hand, lands in play, cast Mirage Mirror into play, make infinite colored mana, and then I'm assuming he has the ability to do stuff here. Yeah, so we can do things like Dueling Scepters. So there's a Phyrexian Metamorph here, so we can see an Isochron Scepter imprint Dramatic Reversal. Phyrexian Metamorph come in as a copy of Isochron Scepter, imprint something like a Swan Song, make infinite birds, and then I'm assuming we have things like, Cyclonic Rift, we have Chain of Vapor, we have some stuff here to do that. We also have a Finale of Devastation, so all creatures in play plus Finale for infinite gets there. Basically,
my question with this list is, when the Finale is obviously really good, and it obviously wins you the game, but if you have infinite Thrasios activations, why not just play Thassa's Oracle in this?
It's just a wasted slot. Morgan Spleenface in this game actually has a very good write-up on this. called WinCon. It's a Reddit write-up. I forget what it's actually called, but it's a great write-up on what WinConless is in CDH and sort of how you build your decks along those guidelines. And the gist of it is that you don't want to waste slots on cards that win you the game if you can effectively win the game without them. So in this deck, you can do Dueling Scepters and make like infinite birds, bounce everybody's permanents, and then like wheel their hands away, and then hold up all the interaction in your deck because you have the Time Twister, so you can just Twister Loop anything as well. And you basically guarantee that you win the game because you have infinite power in play and have all the interaction in your deck up, which like nobody could really be expected to get through, right?
Right.
So because you can win by doing that, or playing Finale, which you would be playing anyway and is also a win con, you don't need to waste the deck slot on the Fastest Oracle because it doesn't do anything outside of the winning you the game, whereas all these other cards also like help you progress your game plan while also contributing to you actually like closing out the game once you have infinite mana.
That makes sense. I was very curious when I was looking at that list because when he's presenting the win, excuse me, I was very like confused because I was like, well, can't you just play Thassa's Oracle and just win here? But no, that makes a lot of sense, honestly. Well, with that being said, any final thoughts here, kind of as we're wrapping up? Sick.
I mean, it was just really there were a lot of pretty nice educational points and things that were need to talk about there. Obviously, the sort of on display there was the difficulty of picking up CDH for the first time. Especially if you're not super familiar with the deck, we can see a couple of things there where you just have to play for long enough to understand how like table dynamics work and holding fetches and stuff, and how that might be important, especially when you're playing a 5-color deck. I think there's a lot of mana management, especially for a deck like Najeela, that isn't super common in a lot of other formats. Obviously, I understand that building mana bases and fetching correctly is a thing in any format with fetches, but especially in a deck like Najeela, where you need to make sure that you have access to all 5 colors on permanents to activate Najeela with Revi, and then you also need to be able to actually cast your spells while doing so, and there's a lot of balancing. I think it was a demonstration of how much just like we take for granted, but you really have to pick up and actively look at and learn to become proficient in. I mean, we also saw a great demonstration of why Sisay is a great deck even when it's low on cards, because you basically have your entire win con in your command zone / sideboard. So really all you need is mana, and then you just can sort of get there. So definitely...
It feels like it is reminiscent in a way to Godo Helm in the fact that if you can count to a certain number, you can just win the game.
It's definitely like it's sort of like remnants, and especially this deck list of like Belcher, sort of, you know?
Yeah.
Sort of the same thing where like you're just trying to count up to a certain amount of mana. Obviously, there's actual like blue in this deck, so it's a bit more interactive than actually just trying to dump your entire hand and win. But it's sort of like an interesting like comparison, right?
Absolutely. I always love to see Sisay though. I have a soft spot in my heart for that card. But it's very exciting to see how that went, and too bad we didn't see it win, but it was definitely cool to get to see that go off. So with that, thank you all for joining us. Thank you to our 2 guests this week, Rebell and Emmaskyeward. You can go check them out. We'll have links to their all their different places down in the description, so make sure to check that out. Also, make sure to go check out our Patreon. There you can like and subscribe. We're going to have some behind the scenes, like an extra game that Emma, Pongo, and Spleenface and I all played together after we were done recording those games. If you are a patron, that is going to be a patron exclusive video coming up here soon. So keep your eyes posted for that if you are a patron. And if you're not, you should join in, and then you'll get access to the Discord, hang out with Spleen, hang out with Sick, hang out with all of us. We're all there. So thank you again for everybody who participated this week. Thank you, Sick, for again being my partner in crime on this episode. So love having you on, and we will see you all next week.